So I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like life, or watching politics in particular, is turning into an Onion article. I mean, you've probably seen the post I made, and you've probably seen it all over the web. Donald Trump promoting bleach, drinking bleach and injecting bleach to treat COVID-19, and also somehow getting light inside the body, ultraviolet light. I really have to wonder, like, if this is his level of sort of intelligence, how on earth did he ever run any businesses? I mean, seriously, don't you wonder that? I'm sort of astonished, like, that anybody could say that, something like that. And if you watch Dr. Burke sitting in the corner there, I've seen some funny send-ups of her, you know, like with little thought bubbles above her head.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that has him in check, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see,
you can see at some point, like, she's just sort of basically staring at the ground and looking quite uncomfortable, and probably all sorts of great, things are going through her head. As it would, you would think that somebody would sort of, I don't know, there needs to be an Article 25 brought in where they just remove him from office, because there's a lot of people that are not very bright and might take his advice. Because after all, they don't have Medicare for all. A lot of people aren't even insured. And so a lot of people can't afford healthcare, and, they get all panicky, and then they do something, somebody who's not very, how do I say this in a nice way? Not very intelligent, I guess. And they end up taking his advice and injecting, disinfectant or drinking it. Oh God, it's just so awful. I mean, seriously. Anyway, I'm just showing you this view today. Down there is a lot of smoke because they're burning off, trying to create fire breaks so that in next summer we hopefully won't have the crazy fires that we had in sort of early 2019. You probably saw some of my videos about that. Anyway, I don't know, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry watching this sort of thing. As far as the excuses on another note, the excuses by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, feigning outrage that, the public's been left out of these now onto the fourth stimulus bill. And the fourth stimulus bill is kind of just trimming around the edges. There's no Medicare for all or anything like that. She voted yes on that first major $1 trillion giveaway to the $5 trillion giveaway to corporations. She voted yes on that, but she's kind of pretending like she didn't. These people, these so-called progressives, completely letting down not only their constituents but the American people. And I hope people remember that next time they go to vote for someone like her, who pretends to be... I have to say, I have less respect for people that pretend to be progressive than, Republicans that are just out there sort of, they're out there very clearly, they don't give a toss. They're very clear about it. I have more respect for people who do that than, I have little respect, but I have some respect for people who are out front about where they are than these pretend progressives. I mean, she calls, Nancy Pelosi Mama Bear. She's only been in, I think, office for a year or something, and she's already sold out and is sort of making all sorts of mistakes and saying imperialist stuff and then not saying it. I mean, she's all over the place like a dog's breakfast, as my grandmother would say. And just remember, with this many trillion dollar stimulus bill for corporation bailouts and of tiny little crumbs for the public, remember that they just pull that $5 trillion plus just out basically of thin air. It almost seems like it's out of thin air. And yet, that's what the sovereign economy can do. Just like that. Congress can approve it and it's paid for. Just like that. And this whole deficit myth that governments keep putting out, that the government budget is like a household budget, is completely misleading and basically a deception. A government budget is not like a household budget. So just remember that they can pay for Medicare for all. In fact, according to that Yale study, they can save, the government could save a year $450 billion, billion with a B, and save an extra 70,000 lives if they brought in Medicare for all. But just remember that the sovereign economy can afford it, just like they can afford to pay trillions of dollars to their corporate buddies. They just choose not to. So remember that next time you're voting and next time a politician says to you, so how are we going to pay for it? How do you think you're going to pay for it? Or if a journalist, so-called journalist, but they're really a stenographer, asks, say, somebody like Bernie Sanders, if there's ever anybody like that again, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for Medicare for all? You can just say, just look at how they paid for things during the pandemic. That's exactly how we're going to pay for it. And then you've got Biden, who is in cognitive decline and has trouble finishing sentences. And I think the only thing that's keeping him together in these interviews, where his wife is usually sitting beside him like a caretaker, reminds me of Nancy Reagan, calling out things from behind a tree, literally, when Ronald Reagan was in the early stages of Alzheimer's. He's having trouble finishing sentences, and I think the thing that's only keeping him going is, it really is like Weekend at Bernie's. The only thing that's keeping him going is probably Adderall or some drugs, to sort of make him a little bit clearer cognitively. But that you can't keep doing that. He's having a lot of problems, and you can see it's a real struggle for him, Joe Biden. He's exhausted every time he does some sort of a interview. You can see the exhaustion, because it's a lot of effort when somebody is in that kind of decline. And these are the two characters. One promoting people drink Clorox and injecting it, and the other one can't finish sentences and is just in basically possibly in early stages of dementia. I mean, these are the two leaders of one of the most powerful countries in the world that are running for president. I mean, you couldn't make this up. That's what I mean when I say this is like watching The Onion. Anyway, you might be asking yourself, well, what choice have we got now? Well, Abby Martin can help you out there, and she's got some really great suggestions. I played this before a couple of videos ago, but I'm going to play it again. It's about 5 minutes and really has some great advice for any of the Bernie Sanders movement that is wondering, what on earth do we do now? What do we do now that we've got these two candidates, and who anyway wants to vote for that awful Democratic Party? And of course, the Republican Party, both of them are just two wings of the same bird. So who wants to vote for those? So just stay tuned and listen to Abby Martin's advice. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.
All these holier-than-thou rich liberals and establishment Democrats who are lecturing and vote-shaming Bernie supporters, who will always inevitably blame the left for their loss no matter what, they're not going to replicate the voter turnout or volunteer base to actually get out the vote for Biden. They're not going to put in the effort that Bernie supporters did, yet they want Berners to do that for them, to defeat Trump. Trump is going to win. He's already making videos about Joe Biden's dementia. He's already been tweeting hella good things about Bernie's loss, right? That Bernie would never dare to say things like this. He will absolutely crush Joe Biden in the general election. And I shudder to think what Trump is going to do with his second term. It could get very, very ugly. That should not define who you're going to vote for in November. Do not waste your vote on Joe Biden. Every time that you vote and give a blank check to the Democratic Party, they will abuse you. They will blame you, right? No matter what. They will never capitulate to any of your demands. And it's just giving a blank check to all of their right-wing policies. And it just continues to push the country more to the right every single election cycle. We need to put all of our energy instead of into electoral politics every 2 to 4 years. We need to put it into an Occupy-style agitation, throwing our bodies into the gears of the machine, nationwide general strikes, shutting down business as usual, supporting workers on the front lines, renters who are getting hit the hardest from the devastation that is coming economically. It is time to organize outside of the system now. In fact, it's never been more urgent to lead the millions of young people who reject the status quo to organize outside the two-party system, outside of electoral politics, into the streets to fight and mobilize for the policies we truly deserve. And that means resurrecting massive labor and anti-war struggles and socialist campaigns. COVID has completely exposed the failures of capitalism, and there's really no arguing that anymore. It is not sustainable. And that's why I'm proud to announce I'm going to vote for Gloria La Riva and Leonard Peltier, a political prisoner, Native American, who's running as her vice presidential candidate. I'm going to link on the timeline not only a guide that I'm talking about the general strike demands, but also a PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation forum of socialist leaders just talking about where we go from here, where the Bernie movement can go and generate this kind of movement that we're talking about. It's very, very interesting, very enlightening. And I just want to urge people to not fall into a pit of despair, guilt, or being shamed into thinking that they need to capitulate into this two-party hell. We've been living long enough on the earth and politically engaged long enough where we know the trappings and the emotional blackmail that happens every election cycle, and I'm just not going to do it again, Robbie. I bought into the hope and optimism through the Bernie campaign for a lot of reasons, primarily because I really believe that Bernie was a good person because of his 40-year track record. And I also was really enthused by the millions of young people supporting him and getting in the streets and mobilizing that giant volunteer base that I literally have never seen before. It was a completely different thing than the Obama era. I think that we can really utilize that energy, shift that energy into something that's a large-scale agitation against the empire and really putting it into workers' rights. And that's what we need to see happen. That's the only hope there is left. I believe in revolution, not reform. There is no reforming this corrupt, broken system. It has to be a revolutionary movement that is taking these problems by the horns and making demands and not ceding to any of the establishment bullshit. And that's where we have to go from here. So I'm just hoping that emerging out of the horror of this global pandemic, something beautiful can happen. The lotus flower grows out of the mud. And that's all we can hope for. You know, we can hope for something that's really sparked and that we can never go back to sleep again, because I don't see how we can possibly accept the status quo after we emerge from this.